pivot from the president is now complete. On a phone call from today with the Israeli Prime Minister, President Biden called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza.
We would hope to see some announcements of changes here in coming hours and days, and I'll leave it at that. That's short. Hours and days.
Donald Trump today not going as far, instead calling for a resolution and blaming his presidential opponent.
Get it over with, and get it over with fast, because you have to get back to normalcy and peace. The whole world is blowing up with this idiot president we have.
And now we are learning how the First Lady was pushing her position on the Commander-in-Chief. Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, here we are. Here we go. Joining us today, Scott Bolden, NewsNation contributor, former D.C. Democratic Party chairman. Roma Daravi is the former Trump White House deputy director of strategic communications. Brad Howard is a Democratic strategist. And Lauren Wright, the professor from Princeton University, a political scientist. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. Pretty big news from President Biden today on that phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, calling for a quote-unquote immediate ceasefire. Why now?
Well, I have no idea what this position, and it's completely ambiguous. I think Biden's first instinct, his first speech on Israel, was very strong. Now we don't know where he stands. Is he with the progressive wing of his party that is completely placing the blame on Israel for a ceasefire? Is it temporary? How long is it? Why is Hamas not to blame and Israel is? There's all of these unclear positions coming from the White House, and I don't think it's good for the progressive wing of the party. Republicans are fairly critical of it, and nobody knows what our president's position is.
I'll tell you what the president's position is.
Tell me.
Great.
I would love to know.
They're a very strong ally of the United States. We're not walking away from them. We don't like how they're conducting this war, and he's on the side of humanitarianism. You can't have the killing fields of Gaza share bombs with and share military support, and more, the more innocent lives that are lost, the more isolated Israel is becoming.
What do you mean they don't like how they're conducting the war?
Let me just finish. When you're killing aid workers, and when you are limiting, at least perception-wise, limiting aid to the innocent lives there and their starvation, something's got to give. So the U.S., who is financing, at least in part, this war, they can't stand by and let aid workers and let starvation carry on in Gaza when we're financing it.
Here's one of the things that caught my attention. After these calls happen, always, traditionally, there's what's known as a readout, in which they say the president and the other leaders spoke about so on and so forth down the line. The readout said that the president urged the prime minister to empower his negotiators to conclude a deal without delay to bring the hostages home. Yesterday on this very show, we had the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, Adam Smith, and here's what he said. Watch.
Israel has agreed to release a large number of Palestinian prisoners in exchange for that ceasefire. Hamas is blocking it. So the one thing I would say to everybody involved in this is if you want a ceasefire, we need to put pressure on Hamas.
That's a Democrat. And today the White House said, you know what? The onus is on Israel.
Well, I think, number one, let's not pretend like we don't have skin in the game here. Americans were killed on October 7th, and there are still 6 Americans being held hostage
and like
by Hamas.
130 or so by Hamas.
And I also want to be clear, like when we say to go after Hamas, that is not punishing the Palestinian people. That is trying to help the Palestinian people by defeating Hamas. Ranking Member Smith, I was a chief of staff to an armed services Democrat under his leadership. He is 100% right here. However, the bombing of those aid workers was a game changer politically and in terms of the war effort. And so the president's positions aren't changing, they're evolving to reflect the realities of the conflict, which is what you want in a commander.
I want to get Roman here real quick.
Yeah, look, a couple things. One thing that really rubbed me the wrong way is that the readout from this call with Benjamin Netanyahu went directly to a Politico distro list. That is a group of people that are strictly focused on the politics of what the White House is doing. That shows the American public that that's why Biden is saying these things. He's strictly focused on 2024 with his foreign policy right now, and it's really making America weak, and it's making our allies weak. That's why we're in this position. So let me just finish. The empty threat that he is making, and it is an empty threat to Israel that they need to get in line and they need to pull it together, is not helpful right now. We really need to be focused on Hamas, and he's not doing that.
I'll get to both of you real quick. But before this call happened today, the New York Times had a story out and I saw it and I read through it. I said, show it real quick. New York Times reporting. Jill Biden, stop it now. Jill Biden privately urges an end to the conflict in Gaza. According to the Times, there was a meeting at the White House earlier this week with Muslim community members. President Biden, a guest told President Biden that his wife had disapproved of him coming to the meeting because of Mr. Biden's support for Israel in its war against Hamas. Mr. Biden replied that he understood. The First Lady had been urging him, stop it now. Do you have any issue with the First Lady jumping in? I mean, this isn't some random issue. This is war in the Middle East.
I think the First Lady can express her opinions the way she wants. She's the First Lady of the United States. But what she's clear to say, what she is saying there is, I think, in the conflict now. And I think that's what the president's trying to do here. But there's only one entity, to be clear, who can outright end the conflict today, and that is Hamas, by releasing the hostages and turning themselves in and allowing the people of the Gaza Strip to govern themselves. That cannot happen as long as Hamas is in existence.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree with my colleague, without a doubt. At the same time, though, what we're not talking about are the real politics of Bibi Netanyahu and Joe Biden. Joe Biden
has only talked to him twice since this war started 6 months ago.
If I could please finish. Joe Biden needs this war to end because he's trying to win the presidential White House. Yep. And Bibi Netanyahu needs this war politically to continue to avoid criminal trial as well as new elections.
Just one last thing.
That's driving both of these discussions.
This quote came from a meeting that they had with Muslim leaders, and Joe Biden is losing the Muslim vote. He quite literally had a member of this meeting get up and walk out of the room. So he is definitely worried about that right now. And
even
it's
our Israeli politicians.
And he's definitely driving the messaging.
All right. Meantime, another big statement today from the Biden administration, this one on Ukraine. Marking NATO's 75th anniversary today, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken emphatically declared that Ukraine will join NATO. Watch.
Ukraine will become a member of NATO. Our purpose at the summit is to help build a bridge to that membership and to create a clear pathway.
Now, if Ukraine becomes a NATO member, that means the U.S. would be compelled to respond to any potential attack that happens on that nation. Joining us now is the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. Mr. Ambassador, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate it. That was as far as we have heard anyone in the Biden administration go as it relates to Ukraine and NATO. When you heard that today, you thought what, sir?
I was very pleased, Blake. I was very pleased because you're right. We have said in the past that someday Ukraine will join NATO. We've said this a couple of times. We said it back in 2008. We said it last year at the Vilnius NATO summit. But this time, in addition to saying NATO will be a member of Ukraine, the secretary said something about a pathway, a bridge. This is a little firmer than we had heard before. So this is, I think, a good move.
Do you think this, let's just look at the timing here, right? The Ukraine aid package didn't get through here in Washington. Now Mike Johnson and Donald Trump have floated the idea of a loan to that country. Do you think it's coincidental now that all of a sudden Anthony Blinken shows up there and says, and makes this sort of close to definitive statement?
No, well, this was going to be the topic, Blake, of this discussion in Brussels, no doubt. And it does come at the same time that the House is looking at this $60 billion package for Ukraine. And they are talking about loans for not the military side, but loans for something on the economic side. By the way, it's interest-free and waivable loans. But okay. So that's okay. So they're moving in that, the House is moving in the right direction. I don't think there is a relationship between the House action and Secretary Blinken's statement.
So, Mr. Ambassador, you know how this would work potentially. No one would ever want to see this happen, of course. But if Ukraine becomes a NATO member and they are attacked potentially by Russia again, then we would be compelled to defend them and potentially get in a war with Russia. Here was Matt Gaetz congressman. He said, quote, "These idiots are trying to start World War III." That was his tweet earlier today. I wonder what you would say to the congressman and to the criticisms that could potentially come.
So we don't. The only thing we know about the timing is that it will happen on membership for Ukraine. Is it will happen after this war is over. No one expects the Ukraine to join the alliance during a war while they are fighting the Russians. They're going to push the Russians back. They're going to somehow put the Russians out of their country. After that happens, then to secure them, to deter Russians from another attack in the future, after this war is over, NATO will give them that assurance. That is the Article 5 assurance. That's exactly right. And that is what NATO does. It deters an attack on any NATO member.
Ambassador William Taylor, former ambassador to Ukraine from the United States. Appreciate the time, sir. Talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Blake.
All right. So those were some of the big foreign policy items of the day. Politically now, I got two texts from the two Democrats on this panel within about 30 minutes of each other, and you both said
first.
You were first, he was second, and then you both texted me, "Hey, are we going to talk about No Labels?"
Yeah.
I said, "Yes, we are." No Labels was the group that was raising tens of millions of dollars, upward close to 100 million, maybe,
Yeah.
right?
70 million.
70 million. Okay, that was potentially going to put a third-party candidate on the ticket. They ran through candidate after candidate after candidate after candidate. And today, No Labels comes out and says, you know what? We are not going to be fielding a ticket. You Democrats wanted to talk about this because...
Well, I just want to say I think No Labels was the biggest threat to President Biden. It wasn't much of a threat to President Trump because the group, the folks they were targeting were wealthy, high-income, either moderates or conservative or Democrats or never Trumpers, so to speak. So that universe was never going to vote for Trump. So they were pulling votes from Biden. So I think it's smart. Well, I'm happy that they set aside there. But I think what this does show is how difficult it is for someone not in the two-party system to emerge. RFK Jr. is running as an independent. He's having trouble.
Maybe a libertarian.
The most well-funded special interest group out there that could possibly fund a third party, incredibly well-funded, couldn't get it. Well, these are problems.
Okay, but I predicted 6 months ago on this very show that they would not field a candidate. Not because the candidates weren't out there, because I agree with what you've said, but the reality is the language that they used was a path to victory.
Right,
they would not field someone with path. And you were never going to, in my opinion, never going to find a candidate who could go the path to victory. You'd have to have polling or something, and it just wasn't going to happen unless you struck lightning.
Find a candidate with these two candidates. Have you ever?
So you're for or against one of them, right?
So the Democrats are clearly cheering this on. What do you think the political fallout of all this?
Well, a third-party candidate does detract from both sides.
Right.
Let's not be mistaken about that. But Scott is absolutely right. There's no path to victory for a third-party candidate because we have a single ballot majoritarian system. Just mathematically, it doesn't work. And so you have to find someone that's willing to fall on the sword politically and become irrelevant, basically, and a spoiler. And not a lot of self-interested politicians in either party want to do that.
And then get lightning in the bottle.
Right.
Well, the donor class is really not going to be happy about this because that's really what the No Labels movement was for. There's really not a lot of everyday average Americans that had any idea this even existed.
Right.
So it's
99% of the country had no idea, I would guess.
Exactly.
Had no idea what No Labels
it's this
was.
like $70 million
what do they do with that money now?
Down the toilet.
What do they get to do with that money?
They get to do anything that's related to political activity. They have an IE, so they can continue to spend in races and defend folks in primaries, like a lot of
that's a war. That's a war chest. That's a political war chest.
Correct. And as moderate Democrats, I want them to go and defend moderate Democrats in primaries with progressive challengers. That's a great focus. Not pulling votes away from Joe Biden.
Friendly amendment, very quickly. They're a nonprofit, so it wouldn't be a political purpose.
They've got an IE, though.
But they do have that, and so they don't have to give the money back.
Okay. I don't think they will. Coming up, he wants TikTok gone. He also happens to be the head of the Federal Communications Commission. Coming up, I'll speak with the FCC commissioner about why he wants to see the Senate finish the job on TikTok. Plus, a story you saw first on NewsNation, an asylum seeker trying to smuggle migrants into the U.S. I'll talk live with the Texas sheriff who helped make that bust and what he believes needs to be done to secure the southern border. And Gavin Newsom Is he trying to skirt a new minimum wage law for fast food workers in his home state? Why some Republicans are now calling the governor out? Live look at Capitol Hill. You are watching The Hill here on News Nation. Back in a few. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on News Nation. So as it fights for survival in the U.S., TikTok is now making its case as to why the app should not be banned. TikTok now claiming that last year here in the U.S., it contributed more than $24 billion to GDP growth, drove nearly $15 billion in small business revenue, and supported approximately 224,000 jobs, so says TikTok. Joining us now is the Commissioner of the Federal Communications Commission, Brendan Carr, an outspoken critic of TikTok. Commissioner, thanks for being with us here on The Hill. Appreciate the time. Nice to speak with you.
Yeah, good to be with you. Thanks so much.
You got it. So I'm sure you saw that report out. I think it was sent to the Washington Post first. It seems like TikTok was trying to get the eye of lawmakers here in Washington. But do you believe those figures? And does that strengthen their case? And what would you say to folks who say, you know what, this is big for business?
Yeah, look, there's no question that TikTok is immensely popular, both with the millions and millions of Americans, maybe 170 million that use TikTok, or businesses that are on it. And that's why the bill that recently passed through the House is so smart, because it allows those people to continue to use TikTok just as they do today. It simply requires TikTok to break ties or divest ties from the CCP, because the problem with TikTok isn't the video platform itself. It's the fact that it pulls all this very sensitive data from U.S. users and represented for years that it's not accessible by personnel inside Beijing, and that turned out not to be the case. So the threat is those data flows back to China.
Speaking of China, President Biden spoke with Xi Jinping earlier this week, and TikTok actually came up, we are told, during that call. Here was the White House, and I'll get your reaction on the other side.
He made it clear to President Xi that this was not about a ban of the application, but rather our interest in divestiture, so that the national security interests and the data security of the American people can be protected.
Is that the message that should have been sent to Xi Jinping, in your view?
Yeah, look, I think that's exactly right. I'm a Republican. I have my fair share of criticisms of the Biden administration's tech policies, but this is one where they're exactly right. And this is a bipartisan issue. You have Democrat Senator Mark Warner, chair of the Senate Intel Committee, who has said that TikTok, in his words, scares the dickens out of him. And he's a guy that sees an awful lot of really interesting briefings behind closed doors as the years go on. So this is a bipartisan issue where the Biden administration, national security officials have been clear, and Republicans have been as well. Marco Rubio, the ranking member on Senate Intel, has been leading the charge on this in the Senate. And I'm very confident that this ultimately will pass the Senate as well. And the days of TikTok being beholden to the CCP are numbered.
So if it passes in the Senate and President Biden signs it, then the two courses of action, the immediate course of action, would be to try to sell it to an American buyer. We had Kevin O'Leary, Shark Tank fame, Mr. Wonderful, on this show, sort of outline why he wants to buy it. Steve Mnuchin, the former Treasury Secretary in the Trump administration, someone I take it you know fairly well, wants to buy TikTok. What about this idea of an American buying TikTok, and would that allay your concerns?
It would. And under the bill right now, it actually doesn't even need to be a U.S.-based person or company that would own it. As long as it's not an entity that's beholden to China, Iran, North Korea, or Russia, anybody would have a fair shot at bidding to acquire TikTok if they go down this path of sale. And it would allay my concerns, because at the end of the day, my concern isn't with short-form video platform itself. That's fine. It's the fact that it is plainly beholden to the CCP. They've tried to cut off data flows to China. They've been unsuccessful as a company, not because they're bad people, but because structurally they are too closely aligned with the Communist Party of China right now.
As the head of the FCC, you just took a trip to India, I believe. What'd you learn when you went there?
Look, India is a great leader on a lot of these same issues. India imposed a nationwide ban on TikTok all the way back in 2020, I believe, and it's served them very well. They're very familiar with the threat from China. They share a border, obviously, and so they've been doing the right thing there, and I think the U.S. needs to follow India's lead when it comes to national security issues like TikTok.
Brendan Carr, Commissioner of the FCC, nice to speak with you, and hope you come on back. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
All right, so this now obviously heads to the Senate. Where does it stand?
It's got a tough road in the Senate. I mean, the fact it was referred to the Commerce Committee, not the Intelligence Committee, should kind of signal something there. And so they're going to look at the long-term implications of this forced sale and the implications it could have on other entities. Right now, it's just targeting people on the list of adversaries. And I think if you consider this issue alone in a vacuum, yes, it makes sense as an easy yes vote. Pass it immediately. It's good for our national security. I think some on the far right are arguing, it's a slippery slope, how and what you deem a threat to national security. And I think that's what they're taking time to consider here.
That's what's so difficult about this is, Republicans traditionally don't want to restrict the flow of information, even if it's bad or dangerous information. And so this economic argument TikTok's trying to make would traditionally be one conservatives would get behind, but it's also basically Chinese spyware, and they're very concerned about that. And so that's why it's a two-party issue, and there is a lot of agreement despite the dysfunction behind the scenes.
And that's a big differentiator. If this was an American company, we wouldn't have the problem at all. So at the end of the day, it's a national security risk. I'd like to know what else did Biden press Xi Jinping on, because there are many issues that we have with China.
You don't think TikTok was worth the time in a phone call?
Well, it seems like this is something that the Hill is already very much involved with. And so for Biden to kind of press China on it, it seems like an easy push for him, a winning argument.
Your old boss, Donald Trump, though, is against this.
TikTok.
Why? Yeah, is against, banning it, and it's against
not banning.
That could be the end result. Could be the end result.
No, we're all against the ban.
It's interesting.
Hold on a second. I want to dig into this. So you're for the bill but against a ban?
It's not banning TikTok.
Well, if you don't divest, then that could be one of the outcomes.
It will. I mean, there are so many people that want to get involved, that want to make this so that, because there are so many small businesses, like your interview just said, involved with this app. And it does help the American people if they can stay on it. I don't see it going away.
I'm curious the Republican argument on the forced divestiture, though, because the president opposes that. He opposes the ban, yes, but he also opposes this bill, which is the forced divestiture, I'm just curious the party on that.
If you didn't have multiple millions of users of TikTok,
half the country, give or take,
right, half the country, this would be a simple security issue, and it would be done and by bipartisanship. They're trying to strike this balance, which, in my opinion, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Either it's a security risk or it isn't.
Still to come here on the Hill. They seek protections in the U.S., but then they turn to smuggling, at least in some cases. Asylum seekers now trying to sneak migrants across the border, and it's happening more often, says one sheriff who we're going to speak with. On the other side of the break, we'll speak to a sheriff from Texas who had to deal with that very scenario. And you know how expensive it is to raise kids these days? Congress just stepped in with a little bit of relief. We are talking with one congresswoman on what it could mean for parents. You're watching The Hill here on News Nation. We're back in a few. Stay with us.
My 13-year-old acts like a puppy again. Almost overnight, she's a different dog.
Perfect poops.
When people switch their dog's food to the farmer's dog, the effects can seem like magic. But there's no magic involved. It's simply real meat and vegetables with all the nutrients dogs need, instead of highly processed pellets. No tricks, just smarter, healthier pet food delivered in packs portioned for your dog. It's amazing what real food can do. Get 50% off your first order at thefarmersdog.com/no-magic.
His karate lessons might not turn him into a black belt. Hi-ya! And even after band camp, he might not be the greatest musician. But with the 3% annual percentage yield you can earn on a PenFed premium online savings account, your goal of supporting his dreams...
Thanks for everything, Mom and Dad.
...will always be worth it. Apply today at PenFed.org/savings. Federally insured by NCUA. $5 minimum to open account. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed.
PenFed's got great rates for everyone.
Snakes, zombies, sharks, heights, speaking in public... The list of fears is endless. But while you're clutching your blanket in the dark, wondering if that sound in the hall was actually a footstep, the real danger is in your hand, when you're behind the wheel. And while you might think a great white shark is scary, what's really terrifying and even deadly is distracted driving. Eyes forward, don't drive distracted. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
You're listening to The Hill on News Nation. To find News Nation on your screen, go to joinnn.com.
Over the years, you've brought them into your home. You were prescribed opioids after the C-section and after Dad's back injury. They helped when you were in pain, and you held on to them just in case. But did you know holding on to unused opioids puts your family at risk? Trouble with opioids can start at home with unused medicines such as pills, patches, and syrups. You can remove the risk and protect your family. Find out how at www.fda.gov/drug disposal.
I need a copy of my tax return. How do I get one?
If you don't have a copy of your original tax return, you can get a transcript of your tax return for free from the IRS. A transcript shows most line items from your return, which is usually all you need. You can order a transcript of any return filed within the past 3 years, including Forms 1040, 1040A, and 1040EZ. All you need to do is go to irs.gov/transcript to order your transcript today.
The key to unlock the next breakthrough in cancer research could be sitting in your driveway. Stand Up to Cancer's vehicle donation program makes it easy to turn your unwanted vehicle into funding to support innovative cancer research. So when you're looking to get rid of your old car, truck, motorcycle, RV, or boat, why not donate it to Stand Up to Cancer? You can be a driving force in cancer research. Donate your car today. Visit standuptocancer.org/cars to learn more.
This message is from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Veterans, do you have a copy of your DD-214? A DD-214 is a DoD certificate of retirement, separation, or discharge from active duty. It verifies your eligibility for benefits and services. The fastest way to request a copy is through the National Archives and Records Administration at archives.gov. Get the benefits you've earned.
All right, welcome back here to The Hill on News Nation. Some more confusion and outrage tonight in New York City over the migrant crisis there. 6 migrants arrested on gun and drug charges last week after a squatting incident. Well, they're now free after being released by a judge. The charges stemmed from a 911 call last week, which led police to the house where they found firearms and, quote, a large quantity of a controlled substance. It's not clear yet why those 6 have since been released. Meantime, in the state of Texas, a group of migrants smuggled into the country by an asylum seeker is under arrest tonight. The smuggling of migrants, now a billion-dollar industry, according to the Department of Homeland Security, with fees typically ranging anywhere from $4,000 to $20,000 per person. Joining us now is Sheriff Thaddeus Cleveland of Terrell County in Texas. Sheriff, welcome to The Hill here on News Nation. Appreciate it. Your deputies, they arrested a group of migrants allegedly smuggled in by someone who was seeking asylum himself. Explain what happened there, sir.
Howdy, Blake. Thanks for having me on tonight. But yes, so the deputy that made this stop, he's actually a deputy that's funded by Governor Abbott's Operation Lone Star. So he's here because of that grant. But he was out on patrol here in Terrell County. He noticed a vehicle that had license plates for a different vehicle. He initiated his stop. He went up to the driver. Typically, the driver would run, and he did lead him on a bit of a pursuit, but typically once the stop is made, everybody bails out. They didn't bail out for whatever reason. He walked up to the front of the car, saw 4 illegal aliens in the car, and then the driver he identified as an asylum seeker that's from the country of Venezuela.
How often does this happen?
You know, it's happening more and more. I could say probably.
Why is
15
that?
to 20.
Why do you suspect it happening more and more?
Well, they're being allowed in the country, and who knows how many were already criminals, but they're looking for jobs. You know, a lot of times they're not given a card to work right away. That's a process that takes place. So they're going to cities like Houston. They're getting indoctrinated into these gangs and these cartels, and they're making quick money.
What are you seeing along the border, sir? You're in a border area. I'm curious, as we broaden out here, what you're seeing right now in your backyard.
Yes, sir. And just you may not be aware, but I actually spent 26 years with United States Border Patrol, and I retired to take over as sheriff of my hometown, my home community where I grew up. And what we have here, the activity we have here in Terrell County, we're nestled in between Del Rio and El Paso, Texas. That's about a 600-mile swath of border. We're the busiest station and have historically been the busiest station. But the type of activity we see here aren't people that you see in Eagle Pass, El Paso, Lukeville, Arizona, or San Diego seeking asylum or other political relief. What we have here are people that are crossing over from Mexico, and they're wanting to sneak across. When you encounter them in the field, they run, or if we interdict them on the highway, they lead us into those high-speed pursuits.
Has Washington been helpful?
Not at all. And I like to say, look, I was hired under the Clinton administration. I worked for President Clinton to President Bush to President Obama to President Trump, and a year and some change of President Biden. With those first four administrations, they all furthered border security. They all hired more agents. They all hired or put in more technology and more infrastructure. This current administration isn't doing any of that. I'm not sure what they're doing other than allowing people to come in our border. But this president and this administration spends more time fighting Governor Abbott than fighting the cartels.
Do you blame at all Congress for not passing the border bill that was negotiated at one point in time?
Hey, I'll tell you what, if you go back further, H.R. 2 was a bill passed by Congress and not accepted in the Senate. It actually was what is needed here along the border. And it dealt, it wasn't an end all, but it dealt with asylum seekers. It either said we have them remain in Mexico or we incarcerate them. Those are two actions that would solve what's going on in those places I named earlier. But the Senate bill, when you start talking about having 5,000 aliens a day, and then we want to shut down the border. Look, when we had similar situations in Arizona, and I'll get it out quickly to you. Sure. When you start putting thresholds, the assistant U.S. attorneys would put 500 pounds on marijuana, 20 illegal aliens in the smuggling load. What did the cartels do? They would smuggle 499 pounds of marijuana or 19 people in a smuggling load to avoid those thresholds. That bill was a no-go.
All right. Sheriff Cleveland, nice to talk to you, sir, and best of luck down there in Texas. Sheriff Cleveland from Terrell County. Have a good one, sir.
Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, sir. What'd you hear there?
I'm very sympathetic to his concerns, and H.R. 2 may be closer to my policy preferences, but honestly, in politics, you don't get perfection. You get something or you get nothing. And so that bill that Republicans turned
Republicans,
down
right. This
would
was like
have been the best deal they would have gotten.
What I will say is the first half of the interview I thought was really insightful. I thought he gave a fair kind of analysis and assessment of why the problem is getting worse. I think it would go out. I think when you look at who to look to for solutions here and what's going on, talk to the folks that are on the ground, that are at the border, both the Democratic side and the Republican side. They have a very unique perspective on this issue with a lot of politics taken out. And again, he's a partisan.
Well,
at the end, he did because, at the end of the day, he's a partisan elected officer as a sheriff that's just elected there. I think both of these bills are just stuck here. It's an example of gridlock is failing. But, these are people that are in office that are just debating this. President Trump came in, saw the Senate bill, not on its merits, but a threat to his presidency or his chance of becoming president, and he killed it. And so President Trump owns this issue as well.
What'd you hear there, Roma?
Well, I think one thing that he mentioned that the Democrats would typically love is the humanitarian aspect of this. But when you talk to Democrats, typically that's not really what they're focused on. They say, in theory, we're worried about the women and the children. But at the end of the day, if we're not closing down the border and if we're not enforcing the fact that you should not come here, do not come here, they're going to pay this money to very dangerous smugglers, people that are raping and killing people along the way in that process. So that's something that I think people don't talk about enough when they bring up the politics of this. It is a big part of it, too.
Who is best to handle immigration and border security? New Wall Street Journal poll, Donald Trump plus 20. Yep. Does that concern you? Because immigration and the border is issue number...
It's his number one issue. It doesn't bother me at all. Falsity and to use his word, fake news on what he says about immigration. People aren't coming to the States to commit crimes as if the Republicans. People are coming to the States because they want jobs and want to get away from gang violence and a better way of life. But it's interesting. The danger of Abbott's bill was captured in your interview from Sheriff Terrell, from Terrell County, right? Because he said the deputy went up to the car and observed these illegal aliens. Now, when a deputy goes up to the car, he's just presuming they're illegal aliens because they're Hispanic? Is he really? And then he's going to arrest them?
If they were citizens.
We don't know that. That's not what he said in the interview.
Well, you're making
these
the assumption otherwise.
I'm making the assumption because I listened to the interview. If he does that and then he arrests these people, jails will be overrun and they don't have anywhere to put these people.
So that's your opinion
because they can't repatriate.
That's your opinion on SB 4, which we'll find out a decision in the courts seemingly any day now. I'm curious though what you thought of the first half of that interview with where he says this is happening and it's picking up.
I think we ought to be listening to him. Just like my colleague said, people on the ground know better than policymakers in Washington. They do. You got to listen to them.
All right, meantime, from the border to across the pond, where British soldiers now allowed to grow beards for the first time in over 100 years. King Charles personally weighing in on the decision, allowing beards up to 1 inch long. Now, only full beards are allowed, and they cannot be patchy or have any uneven growth. Most U.S. troops not allowed to grow beards.
It is about time that
we'll start with you.
Time that those of us who wear beards have justice.
Fritz had this right. They got it right there. You think?
I don't know the reasoning behind it before, but sure, why not?
You've got a full beard.
As long as they're well groomed.
The reason we don't do it is because you need to have a good gas mask fix, or so there are practical reasons. It's not just anti-beard in the U.S. military.
I think the Democrats on this panel could qualify.
There you go.
Wait, you need your beard.
I got to shave every day for this job. I can't. All right, coming up here on the Hill, California's new wage law is in effect. $20 an hour for fast food workers in most cases. Now, while some are celebrating, it's also putting a strain on public schools. How's that the case? And does the new law actually sidestep the California governor's family business? Lots going on there. Stay with us. You're watching The Hill here on News Nation. Establishments across the country. Now, the governor there, Gavin Newsom, has taken a bit of heat. Some conservatives calling him out because a restaurant that he owns, his family owns, is still run by his sister, is looking to hire a busser for $16 an hour. That restaurant, Plum Jack Cafe, can do that because it does not fall under the new California law. Is he trying to have his cake and eat it too?
Well, of course. I mean, Newsom's going to Newsom, okay? So my concern here is the $20 minimum wage. It's really going to end up hurting small businesses because they cannot possibly compete with that, whereas larger companies, corporations, even just mid-sized companies, that will be no problem for them. If you tell a small business they have to start paying everybody $20 an hour, it's going to be a real issue.
It just applies to fast food chains, one, and two.
Right.
A lot of those
have 60 or more nationwide.
But some of those are franchises, right, which are owned
But there's two different types of franchises. There's franchises that are under the national control.
Yes, exactly.
There's individual small businesses that just put up the signage. So it depends on the type
of business.
But we already have the evidence.
They won't be able to compete, is my point. Go ahead.
In Los Angeles, before the pandemic, there was about a third of restaurants would close that open. Mm-hmm. It's even worse now. It's almost half. Yeah. A lot of it's because of this $20 minimum wage, and it affects restaurants of all sizes. It's an absolute ghost town, and we already have
But let's stay focused.
Statistics.
The headline was Gavin Newsom's sister's restaurant wants to pay $16 an hour to a busser, and the the minimum requirement in California is $20.
For
and yet
fast food chains,
Yeah, but their restaurant doesn't even qualify under the law.
Right. Well,
so why are we picking on Gavin Newsom and his family?
Picking on him?
Because we're not picking on him.
Number one, the governor has a blind trust affiliation with this. He doesn't make any decision whatsoever.
But
number two, the Republicans like to say that it's going to do this and don't do this, but it's all based on assumptions. There is so much data out there that proves raising the minimum wage to reasonable levels benefits workers and does not drive companies to go out.
I know the research pretty well in this area, and there's very mixed evidence on it. In fact,
you're presenting it as a fact.
Businesses. I know that. Have you read the empirical research on restaurant
Yes, I'm saying there's about half as much on either side, so you can't make a qualified.
The reason we're talking about it is it's hypocritical because it's his family.
By the way, a side effect of all this caught my attention. Show the headline from the AP. California schools, so this is the public schools there, are now forced to compete with fast food industry for workers after minimum wage hikes. So some of the workers in the cafeterias are now going to these fast food companies.
You want to fight for higher wages, right? So they're going to force other people to
But this is a public school,
but you have to balance it.
You would think they would have an exemption.
Gavin Newsom would also offer that sort of minimum requirement to his public schools.
Raise educators' salaries.
There's a couple problems. The first problem that I mentioned, couple problems. First problem is that it's going to cause issues of competition for small businesses. Second problem is that it's all going to get passed down to the consumer, to the buyer.
They can cut into corporate profits, but they refuse to do that.
Right,
they are going to do it. They've already raised by 10% the prices on, I forget the name of the company, but it's out there.
But they have not reduced corporate salaries.
All right. Another issue, by the way, with a major economic impact on families across the U.S., childcare. The Democratic senator from the state of Washington, Patty Murray, helped clear an additional $1 billion in the $1.2 trillion spending package for child care and early education programs. It includes a 9% spending increase in child care subsidies. There's also more than $270 million to spend on low-income preschool programs. Joining us now is the Democratic Congresswoman from Hawaii, Jill Takuda. Thank you for being back here on the Hill, and nice to speak with you once again. So talk to me, Congresswoman, about this money, this extra billion here, and what it goes toward.
Well, it took us a while to be able to pass this, but it was definitely a huge win when you consider that at the end of the day, this means more seats available to our children who need it. It means more money in families' pockets so they can pay for things like food and rent. What we know is across the country, the vast majority of Americans put anywhere between 15 to 20% of their take-home pay into preschool and child care. I mean, in Hawaii, we have amongst one of the highest rates, closing in on almost 21%. And for some families, it's even more than that. And so before they can even think about food and shelter, for many of them, they're having to decide, can I afford to send my child to preschool? The greatest equalizer that we had. So this is a real game changer for so many of our communities, especially ours here in Hawaii.
Average weekly cost for a nanny, $766, daycare, $321, a babysitter, close to $200 across the country right now. I wonder, though, how much the government can actually fix this, because when you look at a recent story out, Head Start helps low-income families with early childhood education, but it's short on teachers, Congresswoman.
Mm-hmm. There is no single solution in terms of how we are going to support, whether it's early childhood education or public schools, K through 12. But this is going to be a huge step to making sure that we provide facilities on one end. Part of the money that was also passed was to make sure for military construction that we're building new facilities for so many of our military service members and their families to be able to access preschool seats. We are going to, many states use their CDBG funds to make sure that we actually support workforce initiatives and be able to keep people in seats. When you think about the pandemic, the huge amounts put towards childcare as a result of, Senator Murray and Congresswoman DeLauro's efforts, it saves seats and it preserves seats, and we've got to make sure we fund it even more to continue to do this.
Congresswoman, I'm running up against time here, but the last time we spoke to you, we spoke with you because you, and you're a Democrat, Republicans were trying to get voting by proxy, so essentially remote voting for mothers in Congress, for obviously lots of different reasons. Where is that right now, and have you heard anything from the House Speaker?
I have not heard anything from the House Speaker, but I can assure you that it's still very top of mind that we make sure that we have more moms in Congress. We all win as a country when we have moms represented at the table, making decisions, leading. Patty Murray is a great example of this in terms of what happens when you get a mom, yes, in sneakers sometimes, in the Appropriations Committee, putting her money where her mouth is and helping all of our families. So we're continuing to work hard on that.
Congresswoman, we got to leave it there. Congressman Jill Takuda joining us from the state of Hawaii. Thank you, Congresswoman. Appreciate it.
Aloha.
Thanks. Raising kids ain't cheap.
It's true. I'm just learning.
You're just learning.
I've been learning for 8 months.
You've been through it.
30 years later with my daughters, it ain't easy.
What about that idea of remote voting for mothers and dads? And dads too, I guess.
The Dad's Caucus, Colin Allred's done a lot. Colin Allred is running for the Senate, but he's a current House member. He's one of the first dad, I think, in Congress to take parental leave. Right. And so there's a big push from dads too, because you're electing younger men who are sharing the responsibility of raising a child, and this is affecting them too. I think it's a great idea from a rank and file perspective. Right. I suspect leadership wants them there close so they can negotiate policy legislation.
All right, still to come here from the Hill, where President Biden might have notched an early victory against Donald Trump. A big decision in the state of Nebraska, and Leland Vitter joins us on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
NewsNation, the best balanced and insightful coverage on American TV.
And your show is what we need. We need more Chris Cuomo. We need more NewsNation.
Cuomo, weeknights at 8, 7 Central, only on NewsNation. News for all America.
To the Hill, so Nebraska lawmakers have overwhelmingly rejected a possible change to how they would award electoral college votes. Nebraska currently is not a winner-take-all state, as some electoral college votes are broken down by congressional districts. One of them, the Omaha area, solidly Democratic. Now, President Trump's supported the possible change, but lawmakers decided to keep the current system in place. Leland Vitter, host of On Balance. Hello.
Hello, greetings. This is one of these things that us Washington nerds love.
Can we show the map? Because here's why.
We have a map.
We have a map. We produced this segment.
Oh, there we go.
And the reason why is because if Joe Biden were to keep the blue wall, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and if you were to take away that one vote in Nebraska and make it winner take all, in theory, you could end up with a 269 tie. Then, my goodness, this town explodes and me and you get blasted off into outer space.
Yes, and it's this is one of these maps because I've seen it so many times. It is like the brokered convention that we all dream of. Because then, if this is 269, it goes to the House of Representatives. Right. Each state delegation gets a vote, and none of us get Christmas break.
You want to talk about no labels in terms of things that weren't a thing, or no? Or you're good?
I thought you guys were going to replay when I said no labels, no chance. Yeah.
Anyways, what you got coming up tonight?
Look, we're talking to Trish Regan, one of your old friends.
I remember Trish.
There we go.